Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the Sunday morning service at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Laguna Beach. My name is Pamela Flodman and I will be serving as your worship associate for today. Susan Breedice is joining us today as our guest musician. Thank you very much, Sue, for being here. And our Zoom and audiovisual texts today are Don West Jr., Paul Bogdan, and Dara Skorecki. We are delighted that you have chosen to be present with us this morning, either here in the fellowship building where we are staying physically distanced and masked to keep each other safe, or those of us who have joined us virtually by Zoom. We really are very fortunate that there are so many ways in which we can join together. Throughout the service this morning, if you are here with us in the building, I invite you, if you wish, to come forward and light a candle here in the sanctuary in recognition of whatever you are carrying in your heart as you join us for worship today. Each Sunday, anywhere there is a service held in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, a chalice is lit. The flaming chalice is the symbol of our faith. If you have joined us this morning by Zoom, I invite you to light a chalice within your home, as Reverend Rayna lights the chalice for us here at UUFLB. Our chalice lighting words today are from the Reverend Eric Walker Wickstrom. We light this chalice for all who are here and all who are not, for all who have ever walked through our doors, for those who may yet find this spiritual home, and for those we can't even yet imagine. For each of us and for all of us, may this flame burn warm and bright. At UUFLB, we are a welcoming congregation. Whoever you are, whomever you love, no matter your age or gender, your ancestral or ethnic background, and whatever sincere questions that you bring with you today. Whatever has brought you here this morning, we welcome you to our community of mutual caring and serious intent to grow as spiritual and ethical beings. Our congregation is served by our minister, Reverend Rayna Hamre, who leads our service at UUFLB one Sunday each month, as she is doing today, and also joins in many other activities and initiatives at the fellowship and in the wider community throughout the month. Reverend Rayna brings energy and experience and a caring heart to her work as our minister, and we are so glad that she has joined us. Many thanks to everyone at UUFLB who works together each week to create opportunities for us to worship together, to be together in community, our board, our worship committee, everyone who helps to prepare each week for our Sunday morning services and other events during the week, such as the Zoom at noon discussion group. And really, although there are so many committed hands that are working together here at UUFLB, there are always more opportunities, more that we can do. And if you're looking for a way to become involved, please reach out. And if there's anyone joining us today who's new to our community, please connect with us after the service if you would like to be added to our email mailing list so that you can receive advance notice of each service and other events. Connecting with each other is the way in which we build community, and this forms a strong base from which we can go out and make a difference in the world. This morning, I want to express my special gratitude to everyone who participated last week in our annual congregational meeting. In addition to taking care of the business of the fellowship and approving our budget for the upcoming year, sort of those necessary things that have to happen, there was also some excellent discussion of various ideas and suggestions as we plan for the future. And an important topic that I want to highlight is our window campaign. As you may be aware, the windows in our sanctuary are in need of replacing. In this beautiful old building, things like windows do need to get taken care of every once in a while. During our annual meeting, Tom McGrew informed us that an anonymous member of the congregation has offered to advance up to $20,000 toward the repair or replacement of the windows, provided that there is a good faith effort by other members of the congregation to make meaningful contributions toward that goal. And several members of the congregation have already indicated that it is their intention to do so. So if you want to make a donation to this campaign, you may do so either by writing a check, and then please indicate on the check in the memo line that the purpose is for the Windows campaign. You may also donate electronically. And in that case, and you'll see the links by which you can donate electronically later on in the service. If you do that, then I believe what you do is choose general fund from your options and make sure, again, to make a note that your donation is specifically for the Windows campaign. And if you have questions about how to support this campaign, please speak with Tom.
Hey, Pam. Pam?
Yes.
I just added a choice on the Tithely site where instead of picking general fund, you can pick Windows fund.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Tom. So hopefully people heard that on the Tithely site, you can actually specifically pick the Windows fund. Yay. So
yeah.
Getting that set up, Tom. We appreciate you. Okay, I don't think there are any other announcements this morning. So on the slide that Dawn will now put up for us is information about an exciting program which we will be holding here on Sunday mornings as part of our UUFLB services throughout the remainder of the month of July and the first weekend in August. So for the next 5 Sunday mornings, we will be holding a Summer Up program with a Zoom meeting each Sunday morning. So that's starting next Sunday. Summer Up stands for Summer Unique Programming, and many thanks to Don West Jr., who has proposed holding these next 5 Sunday morning meetings focused on the book After the Good News, which is written by a Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Nancy McDonald Ladd. And the subtitle of the book is Progressive Faith Beyond Optimism. And so each week, what we'll be doing is on Sunday morning, holding a gathering that includes some elements of our typical service, but also each week we will focus on 2 chapters in this book. It's pretty easy to get a hold of. It came quickly when I ordered it from the UU bookstore. And for next week, it's the introduction and the first chapter. And I think there's important discussion to be had around these topics. And I'm really excited to be able to engage in that. I'll be joining, hopefully, even when I'm not here in Southern California and away on vacation. The beauty of the Zoom platform is that we'll be able to do that as well. So I hope that people are looking forward to joining in this discussion coming up on these next 5 Sundays. And again, during those Sundays, we will be meeting only by Zoom. We won't be opening the church building on Sunday mornings for the next 5 Sundays. So that will go through August 7th. And then if we can bring up the slide that has information about the upcoming services after Summer Up, starting on August 14th. So on August 14th, again, you can see on the top here again, the Sundays, that will be the Summer Up programming. And then on August 14th, we are going to be joined again by Reverend Stephanie Etzbach-Dale. On August 21st, Yvette McDonald is coming back to speak with us. Yvette is a student at Star King School for the Ministry. And some of you may remember she spoke with us during Kwanzaa, during the winter time this year, and Yvette is coming back to lead the service on August 21st. And then on August 28th, Reverend Rayna will be leading us in a service that she's titled Playing with Fire. So important services coming up both through the Summer Up programming and then through the rest of the month of August. I hope you're all able to join. So again, welcome this morning to all. We are so lucky to be able to join together in worship. And I hope that you have time to stay for a bit and connect with each other, both those of you who are here in the fellowship building and also connecting with our attendees on Zoom during the virtual cafe. And we'll set up either the laptop or the iPad so that people in the building can say hello to our many guests who are joining us this morning on Zoom. As Unitarian Universalists, we have 7 principles that we hold as strong values and moral guides as we build religious community together. The theme of this morning's service, I think, is tightly tied to our 5th principle. As a Unitarian Universalist congregation, we affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Such an important affirmation for us to live out both here today during the service and at this time in our country, outside of our UU communities and in the broader community. So in our service this morning, Reverend Rayna will be sharing with us the stories of 2 brilliant Unitarian women, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper and Julia Ward Howe, who shared their literary talents with the world as they spoke out for abolition and for women's rights. And it strikes me that now is absolutely the time when we each need to follow their examples, engage with our consciences, and explore how each of us can share our profound and deep UU values by embracing art and inspiration to live out our 5th principle, as these 2 Unitarians modeled for us. Our centering thought this morning is from James Baldwin and follows closely on this theme of using all of our resources, including our creative abilities, to engage and to make a difference. So I invite you, if you wish, to read these words together with me and to unmute yourselves if you have joined us this morning by Zoom as we read. So please join me if you wish. The purpose
of art is to lay bare the questions which have been hidden by the answers.
Our opening hymn this morning is number 1017 in the Teal hymnal, Building a New Way. So for those of us who are joining by Zoom, the words will shortly be available to you in the chat. And the words are in the gray hymnal for those, or sorry, teal hymnal for those of you who are here in the building. So please either remain seated or stand if you wish and join with our guest musician, Sue Breedice, in singing this hymn with its focus on action, number 1017, We Are Building a New Way.
I'll just start with a little, just playing it for a second and then cue you in. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We are feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, the world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry.
You're so welcoming and so loving. Our call to worship this morning are the words of Reverend Marta Valentin. We come together today to honor the universal community of seekers to which we all belong. We gather together today to share from our deepest place of safety that we might nurture ourselves by celebrating one another. We call into our presence this hour our ancestors whose love, labor, and commitment made it possible for us to be here now. Let us call one another to the table of abundance, that we may feed on those fruits that sustain us and ever ask us to grow. Let us be open to this moment with hearts that have no borders. May it be so.
Let us take a moment to remind ourselves why we come together as a community. I invite you to read these words together when and if it feels right for you. If you wish, and you've joined us by Zoom, please unmute your microphone so that we can share the power that we have when we join our voices together. Group of unison affirmation will be on your screens. And reading. Love is the
spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Help one another. Thank you.
Yeah, it's still lit. No, are you lit yet?
We have come to a time in our service to briefly share the important events that have touched our lives in the past week. Our joys, when shared, can be magnified, and when we share our sorrows, we provide support and care that are vital for all of us in community. So during this time of sharing our joys and concerns, we have paused the recording of the service. It is as much of a blessing to be able to give as it is to receive. And we invite you each to give what you will for the work of this fellowship that means so much to each of us, that has meant so much to those who came before us, and that will mean so much to those who may join us in the future, and for all of the work that we can do together. Give what you will, for I know we are a generous people. So during this time of offering, we will be passing a basket within the fellowship, and the information on your screen provides 2 additional ways in which you can give, electronically or by sending a check to the fellowship. Please join us now in singing to each other words of sincere gratitude. Stand if you're comfortable as we sing to each other, "From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live."
From you I receive, to you I give, and together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, and together we share, and from this we live.
Our words of meditation this morning are from the Reverend Laura Horton Ludwig, who serves at our congregation in Williamsburg. Spirit of life and love, we are here, not just minds and hearts, but bodies too. We, human beings, spirit and body joined together. On this day, we send out a prayer or a wish that every person, every being, may be safe and well in body and spirit. May every person be well, and may we treat every person with respect and kindness and love. On this day, when we consider the connections between our bodies and our spirits, we lift up our hope and aspiration that all people will live in freedom to give and guard their bodies as seems best to them, and to exercise their own powers of moral discernment around their fertility and creative potential. May we remember that it is especially challenging for those who are living in poverty to exercise these rights. And may our society support them in every way possible. We say a special prayer for all those who have experienced violence or abuse or any other form of damage to their being, which is so precious. May they know safety and healing. For all of us, may our physical being be a source of delight and well-being as we live in this world. May every being be safe and well in body and in spirit. May every person be well, and may we be vessels of compassion for everyone we meet. Amen, and blessed be. When I first presented this service, I was looking for 2 women who combined their artistic, creative gifts and who also use those talents for furthering Unitarian social justice causes. I believe that tapping into our own creative gifts is part of what sustains us as social justice workers for the long haul. Do what we love. Our Unitarian Universalist 5th principle, as Pam read, just one of our guiding principles, is an interesting combination of ideas. It says that we use honor, the right of conscience, and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large. This weekend, when some of us are celebrating and some are decrying the 4th of July, a day when Julia Ward Howe's Battle Hymn of the Republic is traditionally performed, what better way and what a time to reflect on our fifth principle, using the lens provided by these two amazing Unitarian women and their talents. As we are seeing daily, democratic rights are in no way secure. We have spent the I wish you were there, but I was there in Chicago, and I was able to see the well-organized and massive protest of the Supreme Court's regressive ruling of Roe v. Wade, the right of women to make their own reproductive choices in this country. We are not the first generation to struggle for equity. As I was researching for this service some time ago, two very different women emerged as powerful examples of our fifth principle. And I was specifically looking for people who use their creativity and talents to further democratic principles. They lived at the same time, were both active in the abolitionist movement before and during the Civil War, and used their formidable gifts to extend women's rights, including the right to vote. Both lived long lives, but heartbreakingly did not quite make it to 1920 when the 19th Amendment was passed and all women in the United States could vote. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper and Julia Ward Howe lived on the Eastern Seaboard, fought for the same causes, but had very different life experiences. As we saw, Frances Harper was an intellectually brilliant, educated, free-born African-American woman who was born and raised in Maryland. Julia Ward Howe was a New York socialite, petite, very pretty, a singer and poet whose nickname was Diva as a young woman. How do I see the connection between these two very different Unitarian women beyond their religious affiliation and their commitment to human rights for all? I would like to add into this mix their talents, their creativity, and how they use their gifts in conjunction with their consciences, our fifth principle, to share the democratic process and propel forward the rights of women, rights that have been damaged beyond belief in recent days by the Supreme Court. We can ask, how does each of us, how would we use our talents? How do we use them on a daily basis as Unitarian Universalists in service to our own consciences to promote democracy, equity, and justice? How will your own talents and gifts sustain you in the work we have ahead of us as social progressives? How do we each fuse our vision, talents, and conscience? I have found that one of the most powerful ways to live our values is through our expression in the arts and letters. And we were just talking about the theater before the service, and everyone was just, have you seen this? Have you seen that? It's a way to connect us emotionally. We saw this creative power in the opening video that Rachel found for us. Thank you, Rachel. Music and message. To reflect on creativity and spirituality or religious beliefs together, it's crucial to know where an artist thinks their own creative process comes from. For most folks in the United States in the 1800s, the dominant culture would see all personal talents coming from a Judeo-Christian God. We might not agree with this today as UUs, but to truly read their work, we have to be able to put ourselves in a different frame of mind. Individualism was also a growing part of the culture in the 1800s. So their work as female writers, for me, holds paradoxes of traditional God-given inspiration and an understanding and appreciation of their own unique gifts. As modern UUs, we tend to have very individualistic approach to creativity, as we do to many things. We hold our own paradoxes, however. We like to honor an individual's creativity while striving for community, which is its own difficult mix. In my service on Altered Spaces I presented some time ago, I reflected on the nature of the creative process itself. In the 1800s and today, many artists claim they had nothing to do with their own creative efforts. that it all stemmed from God. And to lead into our two women, for women, piety was held to be a very high virtue. Particularly at the opening of the 1800s, a woman who dared to be a public artist or speaker would be expected by her audience to ascribe her talents to a creator God. When I read Frances Harper and Howe's works, I see that paradoxical mix of individuality and reference to a divine source.
What kind of bits did they give you for your ear?
They had to overcome far too many obstacles.
They're supposed to be doing twice a day.
Of appreciation for their individual talents. And Julia Ward Howe was extremely self-focused until later on in her life. Her early poetry, Howe's, spoke to her personal anger and frustrations about her marriage. Revenge writing at its best. People didn't have Facebook or Twitter or even the telephone. The educated folk might print pamphlets or poems for all their friends to read, and everybody knew who they were talking about. These two women were pioneers in the written arts and were criticized in ways that would never happen to a male writer. They were held to a completely different standard of public expression. In the early 1800s, women were forced to write using a pseudonym if they were going to publish, or their initials to hide their gender. We can see this at play in the popular series Bridgerton, where the lady Whistledown, anybody watch Bridgerton? You've read it, okay. It's very sexy, so please don't watch it and then get mad at me, okay? But there's the character of Lady Whistledown, and she has a scandal sheet. Everyone's energy is directed to finding out the writer's true identity. Once they were established, and as the years progressed, women writers and artists were more openly accepted. Frances Harper and Ward Howe were heroically paving the way for women's voices to be heard in print and in public forums. We forget today the challenges these early pioneers overcame to simply get their voices heard. Frances Harper faced the added challenges of intersectionality, gender, and perceived racial differences as an African-American woman. Yet she persevered and is now being recognized as a guiding intellectual force who helps shape contemporary conversations around gender-based ethics, race as a construct, slavery, voting rights, and other reform issues. When I first read their poetry and stories, I was initially put off by Harper and Howe's God language and their own unique 19th century styles of writing, the 1800s. Then I started reading their life stories. That included their biographers' reviews of their writings, which helped me to see so much more in their poetry. Harper and Howe's biographers approached their religious backgrounds in very different ways, right? Because I'm researching to present to you today for their Unitarian connections. In 3 of the biographies that I read, I looked up Unitarian in the index and I found nothing, 0. When I looked up articles in our own UU biographical dictionary, which I just love, if you've never explored it, go in and take a look. It's amazing. There was a wealth of information about their religious affiliations. A wonderful book edited by the Reverend Mark Morrison Reed, Darkening the Doorways, Black Trailblazers and Missed Opportunities in Unitarian Universalism, also provides rich histories of African-American UUs. They both wrote hundreds of works over the course of their very long lifetimes. Both women did. I wholeheartedly encourage everyone to explore their writing. They chronicled life before, during, and after the Civil War. And they have left us, their UU heirs, just a powerful legacy. Julia Ward Howe was a published writer before her marriage at age 23, anonymously publishing literary criticisms. She is now remembered for the words to the Battle Hymn of the Republic and her creation of Mother's Day, the special day originally meant to be an international day of peace. Frances Harper also began writing at a young age, and they mentioned that she was publishing her poems around the age of 20, 21. Their biblical language can be very difficult reading for us. Christian beliefs were a universal language that nearly everyone in the US was familiar with in the 1800s. Scholar Utsa McKnight points out that by using biblical references, Francis Harper deftly used the image of enslaved Israelites to expose the hypocrisy of slave owners. Once I understood the story of Harper and Howe's lives, the flowery poetic language just dropped away, and their poems began to breathe for me, and they really began to speak to me, and now I find them beautiful. Born in 1825 and living into the 20th century, Francis Harper's creative works span not only the Civil War, but the rise of Jim Crow and the crushed dreams of democracy for newly freed African Americans. She published her first collection of Forest Leaves. She was concerned with slavery and abolition issues, morality, education, voting rights. Again, she was just this incredible, brilliant thinker. Harper lived a Christ-centered life and held dual membership. She wasn't just a Unitarian, but she also belonged to the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Both of her faith traditions encouraged her to live by the example of Jesus and to love our neighbor. She worked side by side with social justice luminaries and famous folk of the day, and she accomplished many firsts. It's hard to choose a creative example when Francis Harper's work spans so many years and topics, really for both women. But I was particularly drawn to Harper's narrative in her 6 Aunt Chloe poems. We can see her fusion of education, conscience, creativity in these poems that expose the evils of slavery. The poems are in the first person words of Chloe. The first poem tells of Chloe's children being taken away from her and how faith saves her. She and another character, Uncle Jacob, speak to each other in the poem. So Chloe says, "And then I said to Uncle Jacob, if I was good like you, when the heavy trouble dashed me, I'd know just what to do. And then he said to me, poor Chloe, the way is open wide." And just remember, her children have just been taken away from her. "And he told me of the Savior and the fountain in his side. Then he said, just take your burden to the blessed master's feet. I takes all my troubles, Chloe, right unto the mercy seat. His words waked up my courage and I began to pray. And I felt my heavy burden rolling like a stone away. And something seemed to tell me, you'll see your boys again. And that hope was like a poultice spread upon a dreadful pain. And it often seemed to whisper, Chloe, trust and never fear. You'll get justice in the kingdom if you do not get it here." Through Harper's poems, we see how the war progresses for Chloe. She tells us in an upstairs, downstairs moment, "Mistress prayed up in the parlor that the secession all might win. We, the slaves, were praying in the cabins, wanting freedom to begin." The reader also gets a glimpse of the joy of gaining literacy as Chloe tells us, "Folks just shook their heads and said, there's no use trying. Oh, Chloe, you're too late. But I was rising 60 and I had no time to wait. So I got a pair of glasses and straight to work I went and never stopped till I could read the hymns and testament." At the end of the Aunt Chloe poems, Chloe is reunited with her son, Jakey, gets her own house and has high hopes for reuniting with the rest of her family. And these poems were written just after the Civil War. I love the Chloe poems and they make me cry. The things they tell us on so many levels. She breaks my heart every time I read these poems. And she has inspired me in ways that few poets ever have. Julia Ward Howe penned these words during the Civil War. "Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on." Later in her writing career, which included hundreds of essays, poems, lectures, and sermons, she felt frustrated that this song was how she reached fame and how she was probably going to be remembered. She was right. That's how we remember her. When I read Howe's first book of poetry, Passion Flowers, the poems initially made absolutely no sense to me at all. filled with flowery, highfalutin language, she steeped it in classical and Roman references. My first thought was, what in the heck is she writing about? Then as I moved, so I always like to read what we call primary sources first in history, what that people actually wrote, and then I moved to biographical sources. So I moved into the biographical works, and I read that the poems caused an uproar in Boston with her friends, which included all these Unitarians and reformers and activists and a lot of famous folk. And I thought, oh my gosh, I missed something. So I read the biographies, and then I went back and I read her first volume of poetry from the beginning. And then I knew that she and her husband did not get along. These were written after she took an extended trip to Rome and had an emotional affair with another man. So this was soap opera at its best. This was her first book of poems, and this made total sense. Unheard of in her time, a woman had dared to publish poetry about her own inner life. Two biographers noted that contemporary poet Walt Whitman, while facing challenges, had few problems publishing his first book of poetry, and he definitely did not face the same kind of public comments. The author of The Scarlet Letter, Nathaniel Hawthorne, wrote to his publisher after she published her poems that Julia Ward Howe should be whipped for publishing Passion Flowers. Julia, the diva, was born into an extremely wealthy household in New York in 1819, and her life spanned 91 years. Her personal religious beliefs about God changed over her lifetime. And this is just her own personal journey in terms of religious beliefs. I always find fascinating for each of us and for historical folks. She and her father were Calvinists. They were strict Calvinists, and they believed that our destinies for heaven or hell are preordained by God. Calvinism calls for very restricted behavior because you're always trying to prove that you're one of the chosen, right? So you got to show how good you are. You're always, very restricted in what you could do. Julia eventually became a God-centered Unitarian, and later in her life joined James Freeman Clarke's Church of the Disciples. Now, the Church of the Disciples was an experimental church that blended traditional Christianity, Unitarianism, and the then new exciting world of transcendentalism. All branches of our Unitarian family tree. Howe sometimes spoke at Clarke's church and also at local Unitarian congregations. She was out there talking. She, was a public speaker. And she lived to see many of our modern inventions. And she was reportedly delighted by the technology of the telephone, the phonograph, and the elevators. So it's really fun to read her little snippets of how, she really liked technology. Mike and I were talking about technology earlier today. So I had to choose examples of her writing over a very long life. And my sermon was getting really long, so I kept cutting her examples. But she, again, it wasn't just the Battle Hymn of the Republic. She wrote so much. But she never really, she was kind of stilted in her style her whole life because she got no training. She got no encouragement from her family, nothing. So she had to really develop all this on her own. So she had a classical education. She could read 6 languages. So she was brilliant. But her style kind of stayed the same over the years. So she begins one poem that was later in her life. Hail, Mount of God, whereon with reverent feet the messengers of many nations meet. Diverse in feature, argument, and creed. One in the errand, brothers in their need. So it's kind of like, yeah, you're like this after, after you start reading her poems. But once I kind of could decipher Julia Ward Howe's poetry, if we strip out the flowery language, the ideas are very Unitarian. And the poem continues to describe how conscience creates a temple on the basis of truth, love provides the walls, and hope is the dome. All of this built in a loving God's heart. And she takes about 6 pages to do this. But the ideas, if you can get in and really look at her ideas, it's fascinating. She also believed in living out the living example of Christ. So most of these women were Christ-centered Unitarians. Her peace advocacy was heartfelt, and she left a poem called A Message of Peace, written for children, that tells us to let us pledge on nature's book, heart to heart and hand to hand, for the glory that we saw in this battle flag unfurled. She did love that language. Let us read Christ's better law, fellowship for all the world. So, and that, again, this is a really long poem, so I'm just giving you a little snippet. And Howe wrote like epitaphs, all kinds of celebratory events for the superstars of the day. So, and I do want to mention, while both of these women were very involved, particularly towards the end of their life, in getting involved in rights and votes for women, that most of the organizations were intentionally excluded BIPOC women, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So unfortunately, the underpinnings of much of the work of white suffragists had racist foundations. So even some staunch abolitionists during and around the Civil War believe Euro-Americans were superior. And that's a wrong we continue to work on to make right today. And now that we've heard the work of these women who use their own incredible talents for the right of conscience and to further equality, democracy, voting rights, and peace, let's ask, how can our own creativity express itself in our own social justice work? I believe that our creativity is an important part of our work that ultimately helps propel and sustain each of us. Not all social justice endeavors need to be super creative, and sometimes just boots on the ground are what's important, getting enough folks out. But our creative passions can also come into play to sustain us in the work that we do. For myself, I was so afraid of public speaking as a teenager, I would panic in classes when we had to give speeches. Over the years, I've become very comfortable as a ritualist and a public speaker. As a UU, I now use my voice to speak to the things that my conscience calls me to express. Justice, equity, and for me, expressing the divine feminine and honoring mysticism in our spiritual lives. The way I express these things might change, but they are the inner current that carries me forward and calls me to seek out like-minded folks, like UUs, like all of you. For each of us, there are ways we can tap into our inner creativity and share our work for the greater good. Writing poetry, creating artwork, or finding a new way to present a financial spreadsheet. I just spent a week with money folks for Community Action Partnership in Chicago. So I have a very profound respect for the creativity that financial work takes. All of these, if we tap into our own creativity, will keep us energized and able to continue our own efforts. I'm in this for the long haul. I've been doing this kind of work for a long time, and I have to revitalize and I have to find ways so I don't get discouraged and give up. And this is what I love about our faith, that there's so many ways to be a Unitarian Universalist and live out our lives to the fullest expression of our shared values. And as the past days have shown us, maintaining democratic processes and rights, such as basic reproductive rights, can be gone in a blink of an eye. Rights for women, for BIPOC, LGBTQ folks means rights for all. And one of the many chilling moments in Margaret Atwood's A Handmaid's Tale is when male characters realize that there are only going to be a few men who gain the benefits in a brutal and highly repressive society. The rest of the men are killed or suppressed in A Handmaid's Tale. It's a terrifying cautionary tale if you have not read it or watched the series. This is drama giving us a glimpse of a cruel, repressive society based on one narrow and hypocritical interpretation of Christ's story, and now seems all too possible in our time. If you'd like to take immediate action as we get organized as a community, we have a new means of communication online, an email, but you can go to Planned Parenthood page and they have immediate steps you can take to move forward, not just for women's reproductive health, but for to fight for our democracy. So may the graces, Awen, Ashe, Goddess or God, or whoever and whatever inspires you to be your best, most creative self, bless and inspire you in your social justice and equity work. And friends, we have much work to do. Thank you for walking this path, but heart and head with me. Amen, shalom, salam, namaste, and blessed be.
Thank you. Words to fight by, I think. Our closing hymn this morning is number 348. This is, I think, not one that's familiar to us, but it will be familiar quickly, and with words that hopefully will guide us going forward. Number 348, Guide My Feet. The words will be in the chat in a minute, and so please join Sue by singing along the words to this hymn.
I'll go ahead and just play through one verse so we kind of get familiar with it. Here we go. Guide my feet while I walk this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. I don't want to run this race in vain. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. I don't want to run this race in vain. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. I don't want to run this race in vain. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. I don't want to run this race in vain.
Time for us to extinguish the chalice here at UUFLB and within our homes. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words are from the poet and writer Alice Walker. To acknowledge our ancestors means we are aware that we did not make ourselves, that the line stretches back perhaps to God or to gods. We remember them because it is an easy thing to forget. We are not the first to suffer, rebel, fight, love, and die. The grace with which we embrace life, in spite of the pain, the sorrows, is always a measure of what has gone before. Amen and blessed be.
Do you want to form a circle or just start?
Please stand as you're comfortable as we form a circle to sing our closing song, Let There Be Peace on Earth.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be, with God as our Father, brothers all are we. Let me walk with my brother in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be the moment vow to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Thank you all.